When 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jake refused to leave their babysitter Keisha's apartment, their millionaire mother Victoria had no idea she was about to lose her children's love forever. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The standoff had been going on for 2 hours. Victoria Whitmore stood in the modest hallway of a Brooklyn apartment building, her Chanel suit completely out of place among the worn carpeting and flickering fluorescent lights. Behind the door of apartment 4B, she could hear her children's voices, but they weren't calling for her. "Keisha, can you read us the dragon story again?" Emma's voice drifted through the thin walls. "Please, Keisha, the one with the brave princess," Jake added excitedly. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand clenched into a fist. 6 months ago, she had fired Keisha Williams after exactly 1 week of employment. Now, somehow, her children had found their way back to this woman, a woman Victoria had deemed completely unsuitable for her family. "Emma, Jake," Victoria called through the door. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving, now." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Jake's small voice. "We want to stay with Keisha." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Her own children were choosing a stranger, a black woman from Brooklyn who she had dismissed as incompetent, over their own mother. The story had begun 8 months earlier, when Victoria's previous nanny had quit without notice. As the CEO of Whitmore Industries, Victoria needed child care that was reliable, professional, and appropriate for a family of their social standing. She had very specific requirements. "I need someone with impeccable references," she had told the elite nanny agency, "preferably European training, experience with high net worth families, and absolutely no complications." When the agency called back with their recommendation, Victoria was pleased. "We have the perfect candidate. Sarah Mitchell, 26, graduated from a prestigious nanny program in Switzerland, 5 years with wealthy families in Manhattan." But Sarah Mitchell lasted exactly 3 days before Victoria's children drove her to tears with their tantrums, defiance, and complete lack of respect. Emma had locked herself in her room and refused to eat, while Jake had somehow managed to flush his homework down the toilet. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," Sarah had said, packing her bags, "but your children need more than I can provide. They're angry, and frankly, they need emotional support more than childcare." Desperate, Victoria had called every agency in the city. Most were booked solid. Others had blacklisted her family after word spread about Emma and Jake's behavior. Finally, in desperation, she had posted on a local babysitting website. That's how she met Keisha Williams. Keisha was nothing like what Victoria had in mind. At 24, she was a graduate student in child psychology at Columbia, working part-time to pay for her education. She lived in a small apartment in Bed-Stuy, took the subway to work, and had never worked for what she called wealthy folks before. But she was available immediately, her references were glowing, and Victoria was out of options. "Just temporarily," Victoria had told herself when she hired Keisha, "until I find someone more suitable." The first red flag came on Keisha's first day, when Victoria returned home from work to find her children actually happy. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, voluntarily doing homework while humming softly. Jake was building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions, his face glowing with genuine joy. Both children looked up when Victoria entered, but instead of running to her as they used to, they immediately began talking about Keisha. "Mom, Keisha taught me long division, but she made it like a game," Emma said excitedly. "And she helped me build a castle, and she said I could be a knight or a princess, whichever I wanted," Jake added. Victoria felt an unfamiliar twist in her stomach. When was the last time her children had been excited to tell her about their day? "Where is Keisha now?" Victoria asked. "She's making dinner," Emma said. "Real dinner, not just ordering from restaurants." Victoria found Keisha in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled incredible while helping Jake with his reading homework. She was wearing jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt, her natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked nothing like the polished, formal nannies Victoria preferred. "Mrs. Whitmore," Keisha said, looking up with a warm smile. "How was your day?" "The kids were telling me about your work. It sounds fascinating." Victoria was taken aback. None of her previous nannies had ever asked about her day, and she couldn't remember the last time her children had shown interest in her work. It was fine, Victoria said stiffly. What are you making? Homemade mac and cheese with vegetables hidden in the sauce, Keisha said conspiratorially. Jake said he doesn't like vegetables, but he's already had 3 bites and doesn't know he's eating carrots and cauliflower. I told you I don't like vegetables, Jake protested from the table, but he was grinning. You don't like vegetables you can see, Keisha corrected with a wink. These are invisible vegetables. They only make you stronger without being annoying. Jake giggled, and took another bite. Victoria felt that twist in her stomach again, stronger this time. She couldn't remember the last time she had heard Jake laugh like that. Over the next few days, Victoria began to notice changes in her children that were impossible to ignore. Emma, who had been sullen and defiant for months, was suddenly helpful and engaged. Jake, who had been throwing tantrums daily, was calm and cooperative. Both children seemed lighter somehow. More disturbing to Victoria was how they talked about Keisha constantly. Keisha says if you read every day, your brain gets stronger like a muscle. Keisha taught me how to tie my shoes the easy way. Keisha says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but we should talk about why. It was that last comment that pushed Victoria over the edge. What do you mean Keisha says it's okay to be sad? Victoria had asked Emma during dinner. Emma looked uncomfortable. Well, I told her I was sad about you and Daddy fighting all the time, and she said feelings are normal and I shouldn't keep them inside. Victoria's blood ran cold. Her marriage to Robert had been strained for years, but they had tried to keep their problems away from the children. The idea that her daughter had confided in a virtual stranger about family issues was unacceptable. Emma, our family matters are private. You shouldn't discuss them with the help. Keisha isn't the help, Emma said quietly. She's our friend. She's an employee, Victoria corrected sharply, and she's overstepping her boundaries. That night, Victoria called Robert, who was traveling for business as usual. We need to discuss the nanny situation, she said without preamble. What about it? You said the kids finally like this one. That's the problem. She's getting too involved in their emotional lives. Emma told her about our arguments. Robert sighed. Victoria, maybe it's good that someone is listening to them. When was the last time you had a real conversation with Emma about her feelings? I don't need parenting advice from you, Victoria snapped. You're never here anyway. And whose fault is that? Victoria hung up, but Robert's question haunted her. When was the last time she had really talked to her children? When was the last time they had come to her with their problems, their joys, their fears? She couldn't remember. The breaking point came the following Friday. Victoria had planned to leave work early to spend time with Emma and Jake, but a crisis at the office kept her until after 8 p.m. When she finally arrived home, the house was quiet. She found them in the living room, Emma curled up against Keisha's side on the couch, Jake asleep with his head in Keisha's lap. Keisha was reading aloud from a book, her voice soft and melodic. Both children looked completely content. It was the picture of family that Victoria had tried to create for years but never achieved. We're home, Victoria announced, perhaps more loudly than necessary. Emma looked up sleepily. Hi, Mom. Keisha was reading us the story about the brave princess who saved her kingdom. That's nice, Victoria said tightly, but it's time for Keisha to go home now. Can she stay for dinner? Jake asked, rubbing his eyes. She made her special pancakes. It's almost 9 o'clock, Jake. Too late for pancakes. Actually, Keisha said gently, I made dinner earlier and kept it warm. The kids were waiting for you. Victoria felt her face flush. Her children had been waiting for her, and she had missed it. Again. That won't be necessary, Victoria said. You can go home now. Something flickered across Keisha's face, but she smiled and kissed the top of both children's heads. I'll see you Monday, okay? Promise? Emma asked. Promise, Keisha said. But Monday never came. That weekend, Victoria made a decision. She called the elite nanny agency and requested their most qualified candidate, regardless of cost. On Sunday night, she sat Emma and Jake down for a conversation. Kids, we're going to have a new nanny starting tomorrow. Emma's face went pale. What about Keisha? Keisha was temporary. I found someone more qualified. But we like Keisha, Jake protested. She understands us. The new nanny will understand you too, Victoria said, though she had no evidence to support this claim. Her name is Margaret, and she has many years of experience. Emma started crying. I don't want a new nanny. I want Keisha. This isn't a discussion, Victoria said firmly. Margaret starts tomorrow. Margaret Thornton was everything Victoria had wanted in a nanny. 60 years old, British accent, impeccable credentials, and a no-nonsense approach to childcare. She arrived Monday morning in a crisp uniform, carrying a briefcase full of educational materials and behavior charts. Within 2 hours, Emma had locked herself in her room, and Jake had bitten Margaret on the hand. Mrs. Whitmore, Margaret said stiffly, your children are clearly dealing with some behavioral issues that require professional intervention. They're just adjusting, Victoria insisted. Give them time. But time didn't help. If anything, Emma and Jake's behavior got worse. They refused to eat, wouldn't do homework, and spent most of their time asking when Keisha was coming back. Where's Keisha? Became Jake's constant refrain. Why did you fire Keisha? Emma demanded daily. Victoria's responses grew shorter and more frustrated. Keisha wasn't right for our family. She was right for us, Emma shot back with 8-year-old logic that stung because it was true. Margaret lasted exactly 1 week before she quit, citing impossible working conditions. The next nanny lasted 3 days. The one after that didn't even make it through the first afternoon. Victoria found herself caught in an impossible cycle. Her children's behavior was driving away every qualified caregiver, but their behavior was getting worse because they missed Keisha. And Victoria, despite her best efforts, couldn't provide the emotional connection they were clearly craving. Work suffered as Victoria juggled increasingly frequent calls from school about Emma's crying fits and Jake's tantrums. Her marriage deteriorated further as Robert blamed her for firing the only nanny who actually worked. Call her back, Robert suggested during one of their increasingly rare phone conversations. Absolutely not, Victoria said. There were boundaries being crossed. What boundaries? The boundary where our children were actually happy? Victoria had no answer for that. It was 6 months later that Victoria's carefully constructed world finally collapsed completely. She was in her office trying to focus on quarterly reports when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's school. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Principal Davies. We need you to come in immediately. What happened? Is Emma hurt? Emma is fine physically, but there's been an incident. She ran away from school. We found her at the subway station with a piece of paper with an address written on it. Victoria's heart stopped. What address? It appears to be someone named Keisha Williams in Brooklyn. Emma said she was trying to go home. The drive to Brooklyn was the longest of Victoria's life. She had never been to Keisha's neighborhood before, had never needed to think about where the help lived when they weren't at work. The building was older but well-maintained, nothing like the dangerous area Victoria had imagined. When she knocked on apartment 4B, Jake answered the door. "Mom!" he said, but he didn't run to her. Instead, he called over his shoulder, "Keisha, Mom's here!" Emma appeared behind him, her face streaked with tears but defiant. "I'm not leaving." Keisha emerged from the kitchen, looking as shocked as Victoria felt. "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't understand what's happening. Emma showed up at my door 3 hours ago, and when I called the school, they said you were on your way." "Emma ran away from school," Victoria said stiffly. "She came here." "I didn't run away," Emma protested. "I came home." The word home hit Victoria like a physical blow. "This isn't your home, Emma. Your home is with me." "No, it's not," Emma said quietly. "Home is where people want to spend time with you. Home is where people listen when you're sad. Home is where someone cares more about you than their phone." Victoria stared at her daughter, seeing herself reflected in an 8-year-old's brutal honesty. "How did you even get here?" Victoria asked. "I saved my lunch money and took the subway," Emma said proudly. "Keisha taught me how to read the map when she was our nanny." "You could have been hurt. You could have been kidnapped." "But I wasn't," Emma said simply. "I was careful, just like Keisha taught me." Victoria turned to Keisha, her anger finally finding a target. "How dare you teach my daughter to navigate the subway?" "She's 8 years old." I taught her how to read transit maps as an educational exercise, Keisha said calmly. We were learning about the city and I thought, You thought wrong, Victoria snapped. You had no right to fill her head with ideas about independence and city navigation. Mom, stop yelling at Keisha, Jake said, stepping protectively in front of his former nanny. Jake, come here right now. We're leaving. No, Jake said simply. No. We want to stay with Keisha. Victoria looked around the small apartment, seeing it clearly for the first time. Children's books were stacked on the coffee table. Drawings that looked like Emma's artwork were hung on the refrigerator. A photo of all three of them at a zoo was prominently displayed on a bookshelf. You kept pictures of them, Victoria said accusingly. Of course I kept pictures, Keisha said softly. I love them. The simplicity of that statement, I love them, cut through Victoria like a knife. When was the last time Victoria had said those words to her children? When was the last time she had felt them so clearly that they demanded to be spoken? Keisha reads to us every day, Emma said, settling back onto the couch. And she helps with homework without getting frustrated. And she listens when we talk about feelings. And she makes funny voices when she tells stories, Jake added, climbing up next to his sister. And she never checks her phone when we're talking. Each word was an indictment, a catalog of everything Victoria had failed to provide. Kids, we need to go home, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. We are home, Emma repeated. Victoria felt something break inside her chest. Her children, her own children, preferred the company of a woman she had fired to spending time with their own mother. And the worst part was, Victoria couldn't blame them. She sank into the chair across from the couch, suddenly exhausted. How did this happen? She whispered. Keisha sat down carefully, her voice gentle. Mrs. Whitmore, can I ask you something? When was the last time you spent a full day with Emma and Jake without checking work emails? Victoria opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She couldn't remember. When was the last time you asked them about their dreams, their fears, what they think about when they're falling asleep? Another silence. When was the last time you played with them? Really played. Not educational activities or enrichment programs, but just played. Victoria felt tears threatening. I work 60 hours a week to give them the best life possible. I know you do, Keisha said kindly, but they don't need the best life possible. They need you. They have me. Do they? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria looked at her children, really looked at them, and saw two kids who had found the love and attention they needed somewhere else because she had been too busy, too focused on providing for them materially to provide for them emotionally. I don't know how to be what they need, Victoria admitted, the words scraping her throat raw. Yes, you do, Keisha said. You just have to decide it's more important than anything else. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Emma spoke up. Mom, will you read us a story? Victoria looked up, surprised. You want me to read to you? Keisha says you probably have a good story voice, but you're just out of practice. Victoria felt her heart crack open. I'd like that very much. For the next hour, Victoria read aloud from a book about a brave princess, while her children curled up on either side of her. It was the first time in months that they had voluntarily sought her physical affection, and she realized how much she had missed it. When the story ended, Jake looked up at her with sleepy eyes. Mom, can Keisha come back and be our nanny again? Victoria met Keisha's eyes across the room. I don't think Keisha wants to work for someone who fired her. Actually, Keisha said carefully, I would consider coming back. But things would have to be different. Different how? I would need you to understand that taking care of Emma and Jake isn't just about keeping them safe and fed. They need emotional support, consistent attention, and someone who prioritizes their feelings over convenience. Victoria nodded slowly. And if I can't provide that, then you need to figure out how to learn. The conversation that followed was the most honest one Victoria had had in years. Keisha explained what she had observed during her week with the family. Children who were starved for attention, acting out because they felt invisible to the people who mattered most to them. They're not bad kids, Keisha said. They're hurting kids, and the hurt kids don't need more rules or stricter nannies. They need love, consistency, and the knowledge that they matter more than anything else in the world. Victoria felt ashamed and enlightened in equal measure. I thought I was giving them everything they needed. You were giving them everything you thought they should want, Keisha corrected gently. But what they actually wanted was time with their mom. As the evening wore on, Victoria found herself really talking to her children for the first time in months. She learned that Emma was afraid of disappointing her, which was why she had been acting out. She discovered that Jake missed the bedtime stories they used to share before work became all-consuming. She realized that both children had been trying to get her attention the only way they knew how, by being impossible to ignore. "I've been a terrible mother," Victoria said finally. "You've been a distracted mother," Keisha corrected. "There's a difference. You love them. You just forgot how to show it. Will you help me remember? If you're willing to really change." Victoria looked at her children, now asleep on the couch, and made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. "Keisha, I want to offer you a different job." "Mrs. Whitmore, not as a nanny, as a family consultant. Help me learn how to be the mother they need. Teach me what you know about connecting with them." Keisha was quiet for a long moment. "That would mean you'd have to spend significantly more time at home." "Then that's what I'll do." "It would mean putting their emotional needs ahead of your professional obligations." "Yes." "It would mean admitting that you've been prioritizing the wrong things." Victoria took a shaky breath. "Yes." "And it would mean letting go of the idea that love is something you provide through material things instead of presence." "Yes," Victoria whispered. 6 months later, Victoria Whitmore was a different person. She had restructured her entire life around her children's needs, delegating responsibilities at work and creating boundaries that protected family time. Keisha had moved into the guest house behind their mansion, serving as both caregiver and mentor. The transformation hadn't been easy. Victoria had to learn how to be present without distraction, how to listen without trying to fix everything, how to play without turning it into a learning opportunity. But gradually, she began to see her children the way Keisha had always seen them, as complete individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, and needs. Emma's defiance melted away when she felt heard and valued. Jake's tantrums disappeared when he realized he didn't have to fight for attention. Both children began coming to Victoria with their problems, their excitement, their daily discoveries. The custody battle with Robert never materialized because Victoria's transformation had been so complete that even he couldn't deny she had become the mother their children deserved. On a quiet Sunday morning, Victoria found herself making pancakes in the kitchen while Emma and Jake set the table and Keisha prepared fresh fruit. It was a scene of domestic harmony that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. "Mom," Emma said, arranging napkins carefully. "Thank you for learning how to be our mom." Victoria stopped flipping pancakes, struck by the wisdom in her daughter's words. "Thank you for being patient while I figured it out." "Keisha helped," Jake added loyally. "Yes," Victoria agreed, meeting Keisha's eyes across the kitchen. "Keisha helped save our family." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Victoria and Keisha sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret coming back?" Victoria asked. "Never," Keisha said. "But can I ask you something? Do you ever regret the person you used to be?" Victoria considered the question. A year ago, she had been successful, wealthy, respected in her field, and completely disconnected from the people who mattered most. Now she was still successful, still wealthy, still respected, but she was also present, engaged, and deeply loved by her children. "I regret the time I lost," she said finally, "but I'm grateful for the lesson. If you hadn't shown me what real love looked like, I might have lost them forever. You would have figured it out eventually." "Would I? Or would I have been that mother whose adult children visit out of obligation rather than love?" Keisha smiled. "I think you're giving me too much credit. You made the choice to change. That was all you. But you showed me what was possible. You showed me that my children weren't difficult or defiant. They were just hungry for connection." As they sat in comfortable silence, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she had fired Keisha because she was afraid of losing control, afraid of admitting that someone else might understand her children better than she did. Now, she understood that love isn't about control. It's about connection. It's about showing up consistently, listening without judgment, and making the people you love feel like they matter more than anything else in the world. Her children had chosen Keisha over her because Keisha had chosen them. Now that Victoria had learned to make the same choice, her family was whole in a way it had never been before. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had tried to fire the woman who ended up saving her family. She had dismissed as inappropriate the very qualities that made Keisha perfect for her children. She had nearly lost everything because she was too proud to admit that love couldn't be bought, scheduled, or delegated. But sometimes the best lessons come from the biggest mistakes. And sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who end up teaching us the most important truths about ourselves. Victoria Whitmore had learned that being a good mother wasn't about providing the best opportunities. It was about being the best version of herself. And she had Keisha Williams, the woman she had once considered beneath her family's standards, to thank for showing her the way. If this story of transformation and the power of genuine love touched your heart, subscribe to Black Stories every day for more inspiring tales that prove the most valuable lessons often come from the people we least expect to teach us.